The air in the briefing chamber was thick with the scent of ozone and sterilized composites. Panels pulsed with soft blue light, and 36 species from across 3 sectors sat in dome-backed chairs, their eyes some compound, some singular, some not eyes at all fixed on the instructor pacing across the raised center platform. Instructor Thilzar was tall, skeletal, and covered in a translucent membrane that shimmered faintly whenever he turned. He tapped one long, hooked finger against the display behind him. Assignment Rotation 9-7 Alpha, Planetary Survival Module, Lava Class Terrain, Mandatory Participation. No substitutions. A murmur rippled through the chamber. One of the Grelvins, a gelatinous being with a taste for passive resistance, let out a low, vibrating groan. Thilzar continued, "You will be dropped onto Candor 7, volcanic, unstable. Surface temperature fluctuates between 400 and 1300 degrees Kelvin. Minimal atmosphere. No breathable oxygen. You will be given a single survival kit containing only rudimentary tools and food rations for 2 days. Your mission is to remain alive for 72 standard hours. Extraction is automatic assuming you're still intact." He paused, letting the information sink in. A few limbs twitched. One of the Ventarians let out a sharp hiss. Thilzar's pale eyes drifted across the crowd. Special note, 1 Terran participant. Species 3A19, local name, human. Designated, Jareth Vaughn. No special accommodations. Jareth blinked and sat up straighter. He was the only human in the room. He had gotten used to being the only human in most rooms lately. He scratched the back of his neck, feeling the collar of his uniform already clinging with sweat. "Wait," Jareth said, raising his hand. "Did you say lava class terrain?" Thilzar didn't look at him. "Lava, yes, molten rock. You will be placed within proximity to active flows and pressure points. Eruptive activity is expected." Jareth lowered his hand slowly. "Great." 2 days later, the drop pod hit the surface of Candor 7 with a bone-jarring thud. Jareth's head slammed into the padded restraint behind him. He groaned, undid the straps, and fought with the hatch lever. The door hissed and blasted open, revealing a sky the color of blood and ash, and a horizon that boiled with glowing rivers of molten rock. The ground beneath the pod was solid for now, but heat shimmered up in visible waves. The survival kit was already sliding down on a metallic rail. It clanged to the ground, and Jareth crouched beside it, opening the container with quick hands. Inside, a coil of basic poly cable, a roll of thermal wrap, 3 metal stakes, a flare gun with 1 shot, a pack of nutrient paste, a canteen of water, and a multi-tool. "Right," he muttered. Totally enough to survive a lava field. He stood and scanned his surroundings. The drop zone was a small basalt plateau surrounded by slow-moving lava channels. The air was dry but clung to his throat like powdered metal. Sweat formed instantly on his forehead. He turned back to the pod. It was already retracting into the sky, jetting off with a sonic boom that left his ears ringing. He was alone. Jareth wasted no time. The first thing he did was find a spot slightly elevated from the rest of the plateau. He scanned the area with the small recon scope embedded in the multi-tool and marked several points of potential resource value. A collapsed observation drone half buried in black sand, what looked like synthetic plating half melted into the slope, and a broken probe casing lodged between 2 crumbling rocks. He jogged toward the drone first. The ground radiated heat with every step, and even with the internal lining of his boots, he could feel the burn creeping up through his soles. He knelt by the drone, pried open the casing, and found scorched circuit boards and a half-functional heat dispersal panel. "Bingo," he said, carefully detaching it. "You're coming with me." He spent the next hour gathering every scrap of tech he could find. The plating turned out to be a fragment of a failed mining bot, its cooling coils fused but intact. The probe casing had a small emergency coolant canister inside, still sealed. Back at his makeshift camp, he laid the components out and started sketching in the sand with a piece of oxidized metal. He frowned, adjusted the lines, and began assembling. He worked through the night, pausing only to sip water or rewrap his fingers with thermal wrap when the metal scorched him. By the time the twin suns rose over the horizon, he had built a crude but functional cooling shield. It was a patchwork thing, panels overlapping in jagged layers, held together with cable stakes and sheer desperation, but it created a pocket of comparatively livable air. He climbed beneath it and sat back, panting. "Not elegant," he muttered. "But I'm not dead." From the ridge above, eyes watched. Instructor Thilzar hovered in an observation pod with a small recording slate in his hand. Behind him, 3 other instructors, each from a different species, watched Jareth's camp with varying degrees of curiosity. "He has manipulated waste metal into a thermal barrier," said Instructor Dren, "a barrel-shaped being from Veldros." "Not just a barrier," Thilzar replied. "He's created a microclimate under it. The temperature variance is over 70 degrees lower than ambient. He shouldn't have been able to do that with the supplies provided." "He scavenged," said the 3rd instructor, a serpentine creature named Yalev. "That was not permitted." "It wasn't prohibited," Thilzar said. "We said rudimentary tools, we never said exclusive use." Yalev hissed. "Typical Terran thinking, stretching loopholes until they become bridges. Survival is the objective," Thilzar said, "and he is surviving." By the afternoon of the 2nd day, Jareth was running out of water. The coolant had started to leak from the canister, and one of the panels had buckled under a heat surge. He spent 3 hours dragging the broken mining bot closer to patch the gap, burning his hands in the process. His palms blistered. He wrapped them in what was left of the thermal wrap, gritting his teeth as he worked. A tremor shook the ground. He stumbled, falling to one knee. The cooling shield shuddered above him. A roar echoed across the plateau as a fissure split open less than 100 meters from camp. Lava gushed out, slow but relentless. The heat doubled. The shield began to warp. "No, no, no," Jareth said, dragging the recon scope from his belt. He scanned the ground. The fissure was expanding. His position would be uninhabitable within the hour he had to move. He scavenged the remaining gear, shoving the nutrient paste into a pouch, strapping the flare gun to his side, and using the poly cable to rig the shield into a makeshift sled. He lashed it together, tied it to a metal rod, and began dragging the whole contraption toward a nearby ridge. Every step was a battle. The ground cracked beneath him. His boots were starting to fail. The air under the shield was breathable, but barely. Halfway to the ridge, the sled caught on a rock and he collapsed, gasping. His vision blurred. His hands were shaking. He looked at the flare gun. "Not yet," he muttered. He forced himself up, dislodged the sled, and kept moving. An hour later, he reached the ridge. It was higher, cooler, and more stable. He set the shield up again, reinforced it with the remaining stakes, and collapsed beneath it. He didn't move for a long time. When he woke, it was to the sound of the extraction drone descending. It latched onto him with gentle grips, scanning his vitals before lifting him into the air. As the drone rose, Jareth looked down at the twisted metal contraption he had built from garbage and sweat and stubbornness. It was still standing. Inside the observation pod, Thilzar made a note on his slate. Subject, Jareth Vaughn, status, survived, evaluation, adaptive, resourceful, injured but functional. Yalev curled around the edge of the viewport. He should not have lasted more than a day. Thilzar didn't answer. He was watching the recording again. Watching the moment, Jareth burned his hands and kept going. Watching him drag 100 kilos of improvised gear across a burning field without pausing, he tapped the screen. "Assign him to the ice moon next," he said. "Let's see how he handles the inverse." The first thing Jareth noticed when he woke was the cold. It wasn't just cold, it was the kind of cold that punched its way through thermals, past skin and muscle, and wrapped around bone like a jealous lover. He tried to move his fingers. They responded sluggish and stiff, like they were coated in syrup left in a snowbank. A low hum vibrated through the padded surface beneath him. Soft, blue lights blinked from recessed panels overhead. He was on a medical sled, sealed inside a pressurized capsule. His throat ached, and his lips felt like someone had dragged them across fine grit sandpaper. He croaked. "How bad?" a voice crackled overhead, filtered through translator nodes. "You have second-degree burns on both palms, heat exposure damage to the plantar dermis, and early-stage dehydration. Treatment initiated during retrieval transit. You're stable, define stable, heart rate within acceptable range, no organ failure, cognitive function intact, stable. He let his head fall back. So barely, the capsule hissed as it docked into the side of a larger structure. Magnetic clamps engaged with a thud. A moment later, the hatch unsealed with a puff of sterilized air. A pair of medical assistants floated in. Jareth blinked at them. Both were thin, silver-skinned, with smooth, eyeless faces and six-fingered hands that moved with eerie precision. "Don't try to stand," one of them said, its voice soft and oddly melodic. "I wasn't planning to," Jareth muttered. "Not until my feet forgive me." They transferred him onto a gurney that glided silently across the floor. The hallway they entered was dim, lined with cryotanks and diagnostic walls glowing with shifting data. Each door they passed had a nameplate and a status light. Most glowed green. One pulsed red. They turned into a chamber filled with dry, artificial light and a faint chemical tang. Thilzar stood near the far wall, arms folded behind his back. His membrane twitched ever so slightly when he saw Jareth. "You're alive," Thilzar said. "Not for lack of trying otherwise," Jareth replied. The assistant settled him onto a reclined diagnostic bed. A translucent film slid over his torso, scanning. He winced as cooling gel spread across his hands. Thilzar approached, eyes flicking down to the burns. "You exceeded the estimated survival time by 26 hours. Glad to ruin your curve. Explain your decision to remain mobile after structural failure of your shelter." "Wasn't really a decision," Jareth said. "Lava doesn't care about plans. It moves, you move. You could have used the flare." "I figured dragging a half-ton shield uphill was more stylish." Thilzar didn't blink. "You prioritized style over signaling for aid." "No," Jareth said. "I prioritized not dying horribly before the extraction window." Thilzar turned to the assistants. "Recover him quickly. He departs again in 6 hours." Jareth's eyebrows shot up. "I just cooked myself on a volcanic grill. You'll have full dermal regeneration in 4. The next rotation is set." He sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. "You're shipping me out again, already." Thilzar's gaze didn't waver. "You demonstrated capability. You are now in the adaptive resilience track. The next environment is cryogenic." "You are being tested, not punished." Jareth flopped back. "Feels like both." 6 hours later, his skin was pink and raw but whole. He could walk, barely. A meal paste that tasted like mint-flavored glue sat heavy in his stomach. He was issued a new field kit, different contents this time. No flare gun. Instead, a thermal pick, an emergency beacon, and a hydrophobic blanket the size of a napkin. The drop pod sealed around him again. No crew, no briefing. Just the low whine of the atmospheric seal and the faint vibration through his boots as the clamps disengaged. The launch was smoother this time. Still, his stomach lurched as gravity disappeared for a moment before the pod punched through the stratosphere and slammed into something far colder. The ice moon Relos Roman 4 looked like a frozen marble smeared with frost. The pod skidded across its surface, trailing steam from its heat shield as it came to a stop on a glacier shelf. The hatch hissed open. Cold slammed into Jareth like a wall. He staggered out, pulling the blanket tight around his shoulders. It did almost nothing. The wind didn't howl, it whispered, like someone breathing across glass. His breath crystallized immediately. The ground beneath his boots was slick and uneven, shot through with fractures. He took one cautious step forward and nearly lost his footing. There was no sun here, just a pale blue glow from the gas giant relos hanging overhead. It gave the landscape an eerie twilight quality, as if night had never quite ended. The survival kit's thermal pick vibrated faintly in his grasp. It had a core battery with enough charge for a few hours of heat bursts meant for cutting ice, not defense. He scanned the horizon. Everything looked the same: white, pale blue, and more white. "Fantastic," he muttered. "Now I get to freeze to death." He moved slowly, testing each step. The ice cracked under his weight but held. After 20 minutes of trudging, he spotted an outcrop, jagged, uneven, and partially collapsed. It wasn't shelter exactly, but it was slightly shielded from the biting wind. He set the pick into the ice and activated a slow burn. Steam hissed around it as it drilled downward. He crouched beside it, huddling under the blanket, trying to coax enough warmth to stop his teeth from chattering. Hours passed. The pick's battery dropped to half. Jareth's fingers were going numb. He flexed them, slapped them together, cursed under his breath. Then he noticed the vibration. It was subtle, a low rumble beneath the ice. He pressed his ear to the ground. It was rhythmic, mechanical. He stood, scanning the area again. Movement faint, distant, but real. He moved toward it, cautious. The glacier sloped downward. He slid more than walked, using the pick to slow his descent. Eventually, he found the source. A buried structure half collapsed, covered in layers of frost and snow. Its surface was marked with faded symbols, none he recognized. A small access port, mostly intact, jutted from the side. He knelt, chipping ice away with the pick. The panel flickered to life, barely. A green light shimmered behind the frost. He touched it. The door unsealed with a groan. Warm air, musty and stale, rushed out. He crawled inside. Darkness swallowed him, but it was warmer. Not warm, but warmer. He slid down a narrow corridor, boots scraping against metal. Inside, the structure was tilted, half buried in the ice, but intact. Yellow emergency lights blinked along the walls. Most systems were dead. He found a small maintenance room and collapsed inside it. He didn't sleep so much as lose consciousness. When he woke, his fingers were still numb, but he could move them. He retrieved the beacon from his kit and activated it. A green pulse lit up on the display. Location marked. Signal sent. That's when he heard the footsteps, not loud, soft. Barely there, he froze. A figure emerged from the corridor, tall, wrapped in overlapping layers of synthetic fiber. Its face was hidden behind a visor. It paused when it saw him. Jareth raised a hand. Hi, the figure tilted its head, then spoke in halting trade speech. You are the human? Jareth sat up, joints cracking. That depends. Are you here to kill me? No, I am here to observe. You should not have found this place. I was cold. The figure looked at the beacon. That signal will bring others. Good. I was hoping not to die here. The figure stepped closer. You repurposed a mining signal to boost your beacon's range. Jareth blinked. I did what now? The panel you touched, it was a dormant relay node. You reactivated it. I thought it was a door. The figure was silent for a moment. You stumble into solutions that others study for decades. Jareth sighed. Story of my life. Jareth sat on the grated floor of the excavation passage, cradling the thermal pick like a child who'd been given a blunt sword and told to slay something dangerous and abstract. The walls around him groaned faintly, as if the ice itself were breathing. The air inside the structure was just warm enough to keep him conscious, but his fingers still trembled from exposure. The stranger stood across from him, silhouetted by the corridor's emergency lights, the visor on their head reflecting dim yellow. Let me get this straight, Jareth said, his voice dry and hoarse. You've been here the whole time. This place wasn't even listed on the survey maps. I was assigned to monitor the moon after the collapse of the outer relay systems, the figure replied. Your arrival was not anticipated. Yeah, I get that a lot. He shifted, wincing as nerves in his legs flared from sitting too long in the cold. You've got a name, Lethkai. I am an observant of environmental anomalies for the Arkelian Academy. Observation sounds cozy. Do you have heating? Lethkai tilted their head. I maintain a functional reactor core beneath the structure. It is not large. It cannot support two indefinitely. Jareth began rubbing his hands together, trying to coax more feeling into his fingertips. I won't be here long. Beacon's active. They'll come fetch me. That depends on how compelling your signal is, Lethkai said. This moon has a tendency to conceal broadcasts, magnetic layering in the glacial strata. Your signal might disperse. Jareth looked up sharply. You're saying I might be stuck here, possibly. Unless you can enhance the signal. I didn't bring a transmission dish in my back pocket. You have a thermal pick. That's not a... He stopped. Wait. You think I can? The relay system in this structure was partially functional before you activated that panel. It now has enough of a pulse to act as a signal repeater. If you can trace the wiring and re-establish a link through the ice, you may reach orbit. Jareth looked at the corridor, then at his pick. You're saying I need to dig a relay trench in a frozen death tunnel using a glorified heat stick. Lethkai didn't move. Yes, he sighed, pulled himself to his feet and adjusted the strap on his gear pouch. Fine, if I manage to survive this, I'm demanding a raise from someone. I don't care who. Lethkai handed him a small, flat panel. This will detect active relay nodes. If the light turns violet, you are within range. Jareth took it. How deep's the relay line? 17 meters, oblique angle. You will need to cut laterally. 17, he stopped himself and held up a hand. Never mind, don't explain, I'll figure it out. The corridor narrowed as he moved deeper into the station. Ice had crept in through cracked seams, forming jagged stalactites that narrowed the path. He had to crouch to avoid slicing his coat open. The floor was uneven, half frozen, half collapsed. The pick buzzed gently in his hand as he activated the thermal tip. He found the first relay node buried behind a wall of ice and metal. The detector flickered violet once he got within range. He set the pick at an angle and began carving his way through. It took 3 hours. By the time he reached the node, his arms were shaking, and his coat was soaked through with condensation. He collapsed beside it, panting. The node blinked weakly, one panel hanging off like a broken jaw. He fumbled with the toolkit, pulled out a length of conductive wire and a patch clamp. His fingers were stiff, but he managed to bridge the circuit. The node lit up fully, humming with renewed energy. He jabbed the detector panel. All right, Lethkai. One down. The next relay was deeper buried below a collapsed cargo shaft. He had to crawl through a tunnel barely wide enough to fit his shoulders. Ice cracked above him once, showering him with fine powder, but held. The pick's core temperature warning blinked red every 10 minutes. He rested only twice. Once when his left hand locked up from cold, and again when the ceiling nearly collapsed. He kept moving anyway. By the time he reached the last node, his muscles had gone from aching to simply not responding. He activated the pick for one final burn, melted a cavity wide enough to work, and slapped the remaining relay together with a desperation that bordered on violent encouragement. The moment the circuit stabilized, the station lights flickered. Then the emergency beacon pinged. He turned, half expecting nothing. But the ping repeated, stronger. Lethkai's voice came through the comm embedded in the corridor wall. Signal has reached orbital range. Extraction confirmed. Vessel inbound. 12 minutes. Jareth slumped against the ice wall. Told you I'd figure it out. You are. Difficult to predict. Thanks, Jareth said. I think. When the extraction vessel arrived, it didn't so much land as freeze into position. Its retrojets hissed steam across the glacier, forming a ring of frost that sparkled under the relo's glow. The hatch opened with a hiss, and a retrieval drone extended toward him. He didn't resist. His legs weren't particularly interested in resisting anything anymore. As the drone lifted him into the cabin, Jareth looked back toward the buried outpost. Lethkai stood in the doorway, visor shining, one hand raised. You ever come to Earth? Jareth called. I owe you a beverage of questionable nutritional value. I will consider it, Lethkai replied, the hatch sealed. Inside, the cabin was warm, aggressively so. A medical unit deployed immediately, scanning his limbs, wrapping his feet in regenerating gel packs, injecting a series of mild anti-shock compounds into his neck artery. Severe hypothermia risk averted, the drone recorded. Minor nerve damage. Moderate exhaustion. Jareth didn't bother responding. His jaw had stopped working properly 10 minutes ago. Several hours later, he woke again in an orbiting medbay. The walls were sterile white, but someone had stuck a drawing of a sun in the corner, a child's rendition, all yellow spikes and a smiley face. A nurse with 6 arms and no visible mouth hovered beside him, checking vitals. Any permanent damage, he managed. None. You were very near limits. But your body adapted. Yeah, he muttered, that's us, gluttons for punishment. The nurse blinked once slowly. You are cleared for discharge in 24 hours. Good, I want a shower and actual food. As the nurse left, Thilzar entered. He carried a data tablet, and for once his posture was not entirely upright. There was a fractional tilt, perhaps respect, or confusion. You re-established a collapsed relay network using a thermal excavation tool and a broken signal detector. I also froze several body parts I consider important, Jareth said. You improvised a solution that our engineers deemed unfeasible. That was not part of the evaluation, Jareth leaned back, closing his eyes. Yeah, I'm starting to think my entire life isn't part of any reasonable evaluation. Thilzar stood silently for a moment, then he tapped the tablet. Your performance has been logged. There will be no further tests. Wait, no ice comet next, acid swamp, vacuum chamber with a motivational speaker. No, Thilzar said. You have disproven several long-standing assumptions about human thresholds. Further testing would only create logistical issues. Jareth let out a long breath. Finally, Thilzar turned to leave, then paused. Lethkai has submitted a formal recommendation for your recognition. Jareth opened one eye. Recognition. For ingenuity under non-standard conditions. It is unlikely to be approved, but the gesture was noted. Tell them thanks, he said. And maybe send them a better heater. Thilzar left without another word. Jareth lay back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like he was about to be dropped into something that wanted to kill him. He wasn't sure what came next, but for now he was warm. He was alive, and that was enough.